Over the past several seasons, we've told the stories of children who couldn't read and the families and teachers who tried to help them inside systems that weren't built to succeed. We listened to the pain, we traced the history, we followed the science, and one truth kept rising to the surface. This is not a mystery, and it's no longer a debate. Reading failure harms children first, but responsibility does not stop there. In Season 4 of My Child Can't Read, A Heartland Crisis, we widen the lens to examine the state of literacy in Kansas and across America. This season begins with harm, the lived reality of children and families, and follows it upward through classrooms, policy, and institutions. Because when the evidence is clear, when solutions are proven, neutrality disappears. This is a season about what happens next, about the difference between knowing what works and taking responsibility for it. Welcome to Season 4, The State of Literacy. In the last episode, we asked a simple question. Who controls the system that decides how teachers are trained? Because by now, the pattern is clear. The science exists, the solutions exist, and the proof exists. And still, children are not being taught to read. So if teachers care, if principals advocate, if communities fund solutions, and children are still left behind, then the question is no longer what works. It's who holds the power. This isn't new. For decades, we've known how children learn to read. Researchers studied it, scientists confirmed it, and policymakers were told. At the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Reid Lyon spent decades studying how children learn to read. Work that would later shape national policy and the way we understand reading itself.
In 1992, 93, 94, I was called down to Capitol Hill to brief different congressional members. One of those individuals, Bill Goodling from Pennsylvania, was blown away. He said, my state, there's 50% of the kids can't read, and here I'm listening to this information from NIH, and something's off. He asked Bob Sweet and I to sit down and think about how we could travel that research into practice. My bright idea was tie money to it. If states need money, then they can have the money to implement programs, professional development, and so on that have scientifically based reading research. So it's simple. If you're going to be teaching kids or training teachers, base it on what we know works.
The science was clear. The system knew. The urgency was clear. And at the highest levels of government, so was the awareness. And yet, decades later, we're still asking the same question. Why didn't it reach every classroom?
The proposal as a standalone did not go well. Okay. I think people don't really understand that the Kansas legislature is not full-time. Their session is 90 days. And so they have a whole lot to do and not a whole lot of time to do it. But there's a process if you get the timing right, where if you can get through one chamber, like get through the House one year, then it's possible for you to get through the Senate the next year, or vice versa, if you start the cycle at the right time. And I thought, okay, let's try to get there, because I thought, I don't think we're going to get all the way from 0 to 60 in this one session. And I would regularly tell Dana Hensley, well, Dana, the proposal is not really alive, but it's not dead yet either. And it ended up at the kind of the last minute getting introduced by Molly Baumgartner, who was a state senator at the time from Lewisburg, as an amendment to another bill that they had about changing some terminologies in disability law. And so she attached that as an amendment to that bill, and it got passed. I was about as surprised as anybody when that happened.
And in Kansas, that awareness wasn't abstract. Parents, advocates, and leaders pushed to bring dyslexia into the conversation and into law.
For me, as an advocate and as someone with a disability, recognition is not the end, it's the beginning. The law made Kansas the last state in the country to recognize dyslexia as a learning disability. The implementation of the law has not been perfect because it says that schools and school psychologists should diagnose students. Because it was passed somewhat suddenly, schools didn't really know how to adjust, I don't think, in the time that they needed to adjust. And they're still adjusting.
For a moment, it looked like the system was beginning to respond. But passing a law is not the same as building a system that can carry it. We knew, we studied it, and we built the policy around it. And still, it didn't reach the classroom. Because policy doesn't teach a child to read, systems do. National literacy expert Tim Odegaard explains.
A big gap is they have high expectations with a few words about what they want to see enacted. But when you get down there, there's often not the support that the educators need to implement and put that into place. So in the recent issues of Annals of Dyslexia, they found that the teachers were not often trained on them. They felt ill-prepared. They felt like oftentimes they didn't have the infrastructure it took, nor the time and the space to do it well.
What looks like a failure of instruction is often a failure of support. Because knowing what to do and being able to do it are not the same thing. In my conversation with retired principal and Kansas educational leader Dana Hensley about the teacher heart and professional practice gap. We're in a crisis.
Very true.
Right? And our state is trying, and we've got letters that's come to a lot of different school districts, and then we've got these other avenues teachers can take by 2028 in order to get the seal of literacy. But even if you know it, how do we apply it?
Correct. But they don't often know how. And, it's not the teacher's faults because they are dedicated and really want their children to succeed, but they just don't have the tools to know how to put it into place. They don't know what to do Monday morning. They may understand the philosophy behind it better after some of these courses, but they don't know how to apply it.
And that gap doesn't start in the classroom. It starts before teachers ever get there. Hear what Sherry Utash, president of WSU Tech, has been observing.
What we find is, and this goes back 10 years or more, when they come to us, they need remediation in reading, writing, and math. Many of them, about 60%. So what does that mean? And where are the gaps? Where did they get left behind? Many of those students, I'm sure, have reading issues because they're dyslexic, but nobody ever told them they were.
So teachers enter the profession with the expectations already in place, but without the time, the tools, or the training to meet them, unless they've had access to programs designed to prepare them differently. And once they're in the system, they don't control the curriculum. They don't control the schedule. They don't control the training they receive, but they are still held responsible for the outcome. And this is the gap no policy alone can solve, because when systems don't carry the work, even the best intentions never reach the child. And when that happens, the impact doesn't hide inside schools. It doesn't wait for test scores. It doesn't show up first in reports. It shows up in communities, in places that were never designed to carry the weight of teaching children to read, but are now seeing the consequences of when they can't. At the Wichita Public Library, Children's Director Savannah Ball sees this firsthand.
The things that we usually notice are that a child might say they don't like to read, or they might be drawn to books that are way below their normal reading level. And when we hear a kid saying, I don't like books, it's usually a sign that maybe there is something else going on. Chapter books is what I would see them avoiding most.
The library becomes a place where gaps show up early, where frustration shows up quietly, where children begin to decide who they are as readers, whether reading is something they can do or something they'll spend years avoiding. And when those gaps aren't addressed, they don't stand small, they grow across subjects, across years, across a child's sense of who they are. And eventually, and when those patterns continue, those same gaps show up in places far removed from the classroom, not labeled as reading, but as behavior, as disengagement, as failure. And when that struggle isn't identified, it doesn't stay contained. Over time, it starts to show up in other places. In Sedgwick County Juvenile Court, Judge Macias sees what happens next.
And far too often, they're lacking in school performance. Far too often. If you can't read,
need to read.
if you can't read, the rest of it is going to be some kind of challenge.
And by the time it shows up here, we're no longer just talking about reading instruction. We're talking about life outcomes.
We often ask, who is responsible for the reading crisis? Is it a teacher, the school, the system? But the truth is, it's all of us. Parents asking questions, teachers seeking better tools, schools choosing stronger curriculum, leaders funding what works. Because literacy is a shared responsibility. And change doesn't start out there. It starts right here, with knowing the truth about how your child reads. Start with an assessment. Start with clarity. Start today. Call Phillips Fundamental Learning Center at 316-684-7323 or visit funlearn.org to get the support for your child or to learn more about our structured literacy training for educators.
So if the impact is everywhere and the system itself is responsible, where does change begin? And by the time we see the impact, it's already too late, because what started as a reading gap has moved through a system that never fully caught it. And in that system, responsibility doesn't disappear. It fractures across institutions, across roles, across decisions made at different levels by people with different responsibilities. Teachers are expected to deliver results without always being given the training to do it. Schools are expected to improve outcomes without always being given the time or resources to change practice. Universities are expected to prepare teachers while adapting to evolving research and shifting expectations. Policymakers are expected to solve problems, often far removed from the classrooms where those problems live. And none of these roles exist in isolation. Each one of them is part of the system. And when those parts aren't aligned, responsibility becomes shared in a way that makes it difficult for any one part to fully carry it. And when responsibility is shared without alignment, accountability becomes unclear, not absent, but diffused. And in that diffusion, the one place the system was meant to reach, the child, is the one place it often doesn't. So if responsibility is everywhere, but accountability is unclear, then the question becomes, who is responsible for making sure it works? And more importantly, who has the power to change it? Phillips Fundamental Learning Center founder Janine Phillips explains.
Without explicit literacy, knowledge, experience, and practice, you'll never know what you never learned to do.
And if the people inside the system were never given what they needed to succeed, then responsibility doesn't start with blame. It starts with understanding what was missing. And once you understand what was missing, the next question becomes, who has the authority to make sure it changes? Because systems don't change on their own. They are shaped by decisions, by structures, and by the people given the authority to lead them. And in Kansas, that authority doesn't sit in just one place. It lives within a system designed to guide how education works across the entire state. The Kansas State Board of Education holds constitutional authority over public education. They set standards, they guide expectations. Kansas State Board of Education member Betty Arnold explains.
We are dealing with a variety of problems that need attention, and we need the resources to do so.
And even with that authority, the work itself isn't simple because policy alone doesn't build systems. It depends on how it's implemented, how it's supported, and whether the people responsible are equipped to carry it out. Policy doesn't teach a child to read. Systems do. And when policy, preparation, and practice aren't aligned, even the right decisions don't always lead to the right outcomes. So if the system was built this way, who holds the power to change it? And just as important, what does it actually take to make that change happen? Because the answer to that question isn't simple, but it is exactly where change begins. Thanks for listening to My Child Can't Read, a Heartland Crisis. If this episode resonated with you, if you saw your child, your classroom, or your community in these stories, you're not alone. Now is the time to act. Every child can learn to read, and we all share responsibility to make it happen. I invite you to take action today by subscribing to catch every episode, rating and reviewing to help others find this series, sharing your story and learning how the Phillips Fundamental Learning Center is changing lives at funlearn.org/podcast. And by sharing this show with a friend, teacher, or parent who needs to hear it. All resources, source credits, and tools mentioned in this episode can be found in the show notes. Together, we can take responsibility and rewrite the story of literacy, one child, one classroom, and one school at a time right here in the Heartland.